The rain had started around 4:30, soft at first, then heavy like a curtain being pulled across the sky. Hannah didn't mind the rain. She actually liked it. It made people move slower, quieter, like the world took a deep breath and forgot, just for a while, to rush. She stepped out of the side door of Greenfield Grocery, tying the strings of her apron into a knot as she walked toward the back. Her shoes were already soaked from a leak near the frozen goods aisle. No one had gotten around to fixing it. No one really fixed much at Greenfield. It wasn't that kind of store. It was the kind of place where time seemed to pause, not enough to break, not enough to heal. The bike rack sat crookedly near the dumpsters. Hannah's old rust-red bike leaned against it, its front tire half deflated. She bent down to unlock it, hands shaking slightly from the cold, when she heard it. A cry. At first it blended into the wind and rain, high, urgent, fragile. Then it came again, louder, raw. She straightened, heart thudding. The sound didn't come from inside the store or the loading dock. It came from the parking lot. She looked across the puddled pavement where the cars shimmered under the gray wash of sky, and then she saw it. A silver sedan, parked near the far corner, windows fogged, a tiny shape moving inside. Without thinking, she ran. Her sneakers splashed through puddles, the wind whipped her hood back. Her breath caught in her chest as she reached the car and peered in. There, in the back seat, was a baby, maybe 8 or 9 months old, strapped into a car seat, face red, screaming so loud that it fogged the windows faster with every breath. Hannah yanked on the handle. Unlocked. She pulled the door open, reached in with both arms, and cradled the baby close to her chest. Its body was warm, clammy from crying. The little hands gripped her apron instinctively. She didn't think, just moved. Back across the parking lot, through the rain, under the awning near the store entrance. She crouched there, back against the wall, shielding the child as best she could. A customer walking out paused, then another. Someone ran inside to call the manager. Hannah just held the baby, rocking slightly, murmuring things she couldn't even hear herself say. Soft words, nonsense words, the kind people use when the world is too loud. Eventually the mother came, running, breathless, crying harder than her child. She dropped to her knees, arms out, face pale with guilt and fear. "I only ran in for 5 minutes. I didn't think. I didn't know it would take so long." Hannah gave the baby back, slowly, carefully, her arms reluctant to let go. The manager came, then the police. Reports were taken, statements given. A warning was issued to the mother, who kept apologizing. Hannah didn't say much, just nodded, said it was okay, that she was glad the baby was all right. It was only after the car drove away, with the mother clutching the baby to her chest like a second heart, that Hannah noticed how cold she was. Her hands were trembling, her knees ached. The rain had seeped all the way through her clothes. She felt wrung out, hollow. She sat on the curb, watching the water swirl down the parking lot drains, and for a moment, she didn't feel like a hero. She felt like a ghost. A wind passed. The clouds shifted slightly. Hannah stood, grabbed her bike, and started walking it toward the sidewalk. No point trying to ride on a flat tire. She didn't see the black car parked near the entrance, didn't notice the man inside, the one who had been watching the whole thing. From the back seat of the limousine, Julian Markham hadn't moved. He hadn't planned to be there that day. Usually his driver did the errands, but something about this particular stop, something he couldn't name, had made him decide to come along. He'd been answering emails, sipping espresso from a travel mug, when he glanced out the tinted window and saw her. A young woman, drenched in rain, running toward a car with a child inside. Her movements were instinctive, urgent, not panicked, but deliberate, protective. Then she reappeared, child in arms, soaked and steady as a lighthouse in a storm. Julian didn't breathe. There was something about the way she held that baby, not just the care, But the knowing, like she had held pain before, like she remembered what it was like to be small and scared and alone. When she gave the child back and sat on the curb, her shoulders slumped, he saw something else. Loneliness. Not the ordinary kind, the deep, invisible kind, the kind he recognized, because he carried it too. He watched her walk away, slowly, bike in hand, head low. He reached for the button that controlled the window, but his hand stopped mid-air. He didn't even know her name. But something inside him stirred, not curiosity, not pity, recognition, and a memory he hadn't thought of in years, a day long ago, another parking lot, another rainstorm, and a girl with the same eyes, the same stillness in a storm. His driver asked, "Shall we go, sir?" Julian didn't answer right away. He was still watching the girl disappear into the streetlight and rain. The wind carried the faintest echo of a baby's cry. And something else. The beginning of something that neither of them could name yet. But life, he knew, had a strange way of circling back, of weaving paths where there once was silence. He leaned back in his seat, and for the first time in a long time, he whispered to no one in particular, "She looks familiar." Julian Markham had always trusted his instincts. In business, in negotiation, in the quiet calculations behind every successful investment, he listened to the part of himself that noticed what others overlooked. That instinct was humming now, soft but insistent, like a string pulled taut across his chest. The girl. She had vanished into the rain, but her face stayed with him. Not in the way pretty things do, fleeting and shallow, but the way echoes linger long after the sound fades. There was something about her, about the way she moved, the way she held the child, the way she looked after it all ended, that clawed at memory. A strange, intimate déjà vu. He asked the driver to pull over. Later that night, alone in his high-rise apartment with the city blinking below him like 1,000 missed messages, Julian sat on the edge of his leather couch, laptop open. The screen glowed as he searched through digital archives, grainy security footage from over a decade ago. He didn't know what he was looking for, just that he had to find it. And then he did. A rainy evening, not unlike today. A younger Julian, 17 or 18, standing beside his mother's silver Volvo, panic etched into his features. His mother collapsed near the driver's side door, pale and unconscious. People passed, umbrellas shielding their eyes. No one stopped. Except one. A teenage girl in a worn-out hoodie and a long skirt. She bent beside his mother, checked her pulse, cradled her head gently. Then she turned to Julian, said something that wasn't picked up by the camera, but he remembered it now. "She'll be okay. Call the ambulance. I'll stay." He had forgotten her face. Time and trauma had blurred it. Until now. He leaned closer to the screen, heart pounding. It was her. Hannah. He didn't know her name then. She'd left before the ambulance arrived, quietly. No one had thanked her. No one had even asked who she was. Now he had a name. Hannah Miller. The grocery store employee, the girl who had once knelt in the rain beside his dying mother, and who now years later had done it again, for someone else's child. He leaned back, swallowed hard. It felt surreal, like the past had reached forward and tapped him on the shoulder. He opened a new tab, began searching her name, slowly, carefully. Her record wasn't long, just enough. Age 28, no criminal history, high school valedictorian, a scholarship to a state university, but she hadn't gone. Instead, a string of part-time jobs, grocery stores, caretaking, library clerks, a few volunteer stints at senior homes, no close family, legal guardianship of an aunt who'd passed away 5 years ago, no social media beyond a barely used account with pictures of a cat and an old bicycle. It was all so unremarkable, quiet. But Julian knew better than to mistake quiet for empty. He sat in the silence of his apartment, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound. For someone who spent his life surrounded by ambition, wealth, and calculated power plays, Hannah's life looked almost like stillness. But to him, it wasn't. It was resilience. She had done something no one else had done that day, 15 years ago, and again today. She had stopped. She had cared. And no one had ever seen her, until now. The next morning, Julian returned to the grocery store. He didn't plan to speak to her yet, just to watch, to make sure the moment hadn't tricked him. He stayed outside, leaned against the hood of his car, coffee in hand. Hannah emerged through the side door at exactly 6:58 a.m., carrying a box of produce to restock the outside display. Same hoodie, same tired eyes. But her movements were graceful in their own way, measured, like someone who had learned to conserve energy because life never gave her extra. As she adjusted the rows of apples, a toddler walked too close to the curb. Hannah noticed before the mother did. She reached out instinctively, steadying the child with a hand on the back. Just a moment, but it was the kind of moment people missed unless they were looking. Julian watched her for 3 more days, not like a stalker, not like a businessman, more like someone catching up to the truth he should have seen years ago. She was the same girl, only now she looked older, not in the lines on her face, but in the way she stood, the way she guarded her joy, like someone who had learned that hope was not always safe. On the 4th day, he stepped inside. He didn't wear a suit, just jeans, a simple coat. He walked the aisles without taking anything, heart thumping louder with every step. He paused near the produce section. She was stacking oranges. When she turned, their eyes met, and something flickered in hers. Not recognition, but caution. "Can I help you find something?" she asked. Her voice was soft but steady, no nonsense. Not unfriendly, but careful. He shook his head. "No, I was hoping to speak with you." "About?" There was a pause. Julian took a breath. "The baby," he said, "from the other day. I saw what you did." She blinked. Her jaw tightened slightly, the way people tense before they step away. "I just did what anyone would do." "No," he replied, gently, "you didn't. That's the thing." She folded her arms. "Look, if you're with the news or something, I'm not interested." "I'm not." "Then what do you want?" He hesitated. "To thank you," he said finally, "and maybe to make you an offer." Now she narrowed her eyes. "What kind of offer?" "I run a foundation," Julian said. "Community projects, outreach programs. We're opening a new branch downtown. We need people who understand people. Not resumes, not reputations, just heart." She looked at him long and hard, and he knew this wasn't the kind of woman who jumped at opportunity. This was someone who'd been promised before, who'd been let down. "I'm not a charity case." "I know," he said quietly. "That's why I'm here." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then she turned back to the oranges. "I'm on shift," she said. "If you're serious, you can come back when I'm off." He smiled. "I will." And as he walked away, he thought not about the offer, not even about the past, but about the way fate waits. Patient, invisible, waiting for the right parking lot in the rain to bring people back to the beginning. They sat at a small table outside a bakery near the edge of the block, one of those quiet places where the coffee wasn't fancy, but it was hot, and the chairs didn't wobble. Hannah kept her hands wrapped around the paper cup, though it had long gone cold. Julian had insisted on walking her there after her shift, even offering to pay for her breakfast. She had declined, twice, then reluctantly accepted. He didn't talk much at first, just listened. Not the artificial kind of listening. He didn't nod at every word, didn't fill the silences with encouragement. He waited, patient, present. That unsettled her more than if he'd been overly friendly. "I looked you up," she said finally, eyes still on the rim of her cup. "You're not just some guy with a foundation." Julian didn't flinch. "No, I'm not. You're rich. Magazine-level rich." He nodded slowly. "I suppose that's true. So why me? Why here? You could hire someone with a degree from Stanford and 3 languages on their resume. Why the grocery clerk who wears second-hand sneakers and still eats ramen at 30? Julian took a sip of his coffee. It was bitter, burnt even, but he didn't mind. "Because you stopped," he said. "Because when the world went rushing by, you didn't. You saw someone in need, and you moved. Not for attention, not for reward. You just moved." Hannah frowned. "That doesn't mean I know how to run programs or manage people. You saw one moment. That's not my whole story." "I know," he said, "but it's where I want to start." She looked at him then, really looked. There was something in his face that didn't quite fit the polished image she'd expected. A quiet tiredness around the eyes, a softness in the mouth. Like someone who'd seen too much of the world's glitter and come away unimpressed. "You keep saying you saw me that day," she said, "the baby. But you also said you recognized me, that you thought we'd met before." Julian hesitated. Then he set his cup down and folded his hands. 15 years ago, he began. "My mother collapsed in a parking lot. She had a heart condition no one knew about. I was 18. I froze. Everyone passed by." He paused, watching the flicker of recognition on Hannah's face. "And a girl, barely older than me, stepped out of nowhere, knelt beside her, and stayed. She held her until the ambulance came. Then she disappeared." The cup trembled slightly in Hannah's hands. "I remember that day," she said, voice low. "It was raining." "Yes," Julian replied. "It was. I was walking home from tutoring a kid at the library. I saw your mom go down. I didn't think. I just went. You saved her. I didn't do anything special. You stayed. That's special." She stared at the table. "I never knew what happened. I left before the ambulance came. I had to get home. My aunt, she wasn't well." Julian nodded. "She lived a few more years. My mom, I mean. She always talked about the girl in the rain." A silence stretched between them. Not uncomfortable, just deep, like something buried long ago had finally been dug up and laid out between them. Hannah laughed softly, but there was no humor in it. "It's strange. I'd forgotten how good that moment felt, just helping someone. Then life took over. My aunt got worse, bills piled up, I gave up the scholarship. One small decision after another, and suddenly you're 30 and invisible." "You're not invisible. You say that now. I mean it now." She leaned back in her chair. "Is this some kind of redemption project for you?" she asked. "You found the girl who helped your mother, and now you want to fix her life?" "No," Julian said quietly. "This isn't about fixing. It's about offering. You helped me once. You helped someone else last week. I see who you are, Hannah. The world may not reward people like you often, but I can." She exhaled, long and slow, then tilted her head, skeptical. "What's the catch?" "There isn't one. There's always a catch." He smiled. "You're allowed to be cautious." "I am cautious. I've lived through enough to know good things usually come with strings." Julian reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small envelope. "This is just information," he said. "The foundation. The role I think you'd be perfect for. You can read it, throw it away, decide later." She took the envelope, set it on the table, but didn't open it. "I'll think about it. That's all I ask." The wind picked up slightly, blowing a stray curl into her face. She tucked it behind her ear without thinking. He noticed her hands were calloused, evidence of years of labor, real work the world never applauded. "I wasn't planning on crying today," she said, her voice breaking just slightly. "I don't even know why I feel like I could." He didn't reach out, didn't offer a tissue or a speech. He just said, "Sometimes, when the past finally finds us, it brings the part of us we forgot we left behind." She closed her eyes for a second, then opened them, clear and steady. "You're not what I expected," she said. "Neither are you." They finished their coffee in silence. When they stood to leave, he didn't walk too close, gave her space. But before they parted ways, he turned. "You didn't ask what the job pays. I figured if it was insultingly low, you'd lead with the number." Julian laughed, genuinely, for the first time in weeks. "It's not low, not at all." She nodded once. "I'll read it." And for the first time in years, she meant it. As she walked away, envelope tucked inside her coat, she realized something unexpected had opened inside her. Not trust, not yet, but something softer. A small crack in the wall she'd built around herself. And through it, something light was beginning to glow. The envelope sat unopened on Hannah's nightstand for 3 days. She'd picked it up once, thumbed the corner, almost tore it open. But something in her paused. Fear, maybe? Or just the weight of past disappointments? When you've spent years bracing for life to pull the rug out from under you, even kindness can feel like a trek. But on the 4th morning, she opened it. There was no fanfare, just a cleanly typed letter printed on textured paper with the name of the foundation at the top, the Markham Initiative. The job title read, Community Programs Coordinator, Outreach and Development. Below that, salary, benefits, hours, mentorship. And in the final line, one simple sentence in Julian's handwriting. "You don't owe anyone your story, but you deserve a place where your story matters." Hannah stared at the line until her eyes blurred. She had worked since she was 17, cleaned hospital rooms while studying for her high school diploma, waitressed night shifts while managing her aunt's medications. She had been dependable, resourceful, invisible. No one had ever offered her anything like this. No one had ever believed she could lead. That afternoon, she took the bus to the downtown office address listed on the letter. It was a quiet, sunlit building nestled between a bookstore and a rundown post office. Nothing intimidating. No marble lobby or glass elevators. Just warmth. The receptionist, an older woman with a laugh like a kettle boiling, welcomed her by name. "We've been expecting you," she said. Hannah blinked. "How did you—" But the woman was already reaching for a clipboard. "Julian said you'd come today. He's in the back." He was waiting in a modest meeting room. No tie, sleeves rolled, coffee in hand. The window behind him was cracked open, letting in the sounds of the street. Kids laughing, buses groaning, a dog barking somewhere. "You came," he said, with a smile that didn't push. "I read it," she replied. "And?" "I don't know what you see in me." Julian gestured for her to sit. "That's okay. You don't have to see it yet. I'll hold that belief until you do." She looked around. The walls were lined with photos of community projects, gardens built in abandoned lots, reading programs at bus stops, pop-up kitchens in neighborhoods forgotten by city budgets. "This is real," she murmured. "Very. And you want me to help shape it. You've lived what we're trying to reach. Most people here have degrees. You have understanding." She exhaled slowly. "I'm not polished. Neither is the world." He slid a folder across the table. Inside were plans. Not theories, not lofty speeches, just blueprints for real things. Food drives, skill workshops, school partnerships. And handwritten notes on the margins. Ideas, questions, lists. "Hannah," he said, voice steady, "this is not a rescue. This is an invitation." She nodded once, then again, and accepted. Her first week was quiet. She shadowed a woman named Rosa who ran the Women's Support Circle. She sat in on youth center meetings, listened more than she spoke, took notes until her wrist cramped. The office wasn't large, but it buzzed with purpose. People came and went constantly. Single parents, volunteers, folks looking for food vouchers, or just someone to talk to. Hannah stayed late most nights, not because she had to, but because she wanted to understand every layer. She had expected to feel out of place. Instead, she felt needed. She rearranged the storage room so supplies were easier to access. She helped redesign the intake form so people didn't have to relive their trauma in every box they checked. She suggested an open hour every Friday, where people could just come by. No appointments, no pressure. Small things, but they added up. By the second week, she was running the Friday session. People started remembering her name. She wasn't the girl from the grocery store anymore. She was Miss Hannah, or just the one who listens. Julian checked in without hovering. He'd stop by mid-morning sometimes with muffins from the bakery down the block. He never stayed long, just asked how she was doing, if she needed anything. He never talked about the past, not the parking lot, not the rain. She appreciated that more than she could say, because, for once, she wasn't being defined by what she'd done. She was being trusted with what she could be. One afternoon, as she walked to the nearby shelter to discuss a partnership, she passed a teenage girl sitting on the curb, head bent over her phone, tears streaking down her cheeks. Most people walked past. Hannah stopped. She knelt beside her, the way she had once done for a stranger's mother, the way she had done for a child in a car. "Are you okay?" she asked. The girl didn't answer right away, but she didn't run. Eventually, she whispered, "They kicked me out. My aunt, she said she was done." Hannah didn't ask for the whole story. She didn't need it. She just said, "Come with me. There's somewhere we can talk." She brought the girl back to the center, got her water, called Rosa. Later that night, as she closed the office, Julian appeared at the door. "I heard," he said. Hannah shrugged, trying to downplay it. "Just doing the job." "No," he replied. "You're doing more." She didn't answer. She didn't have to. Because she felt it now for the first time in years. Not the fragile spark of hope, but something sturdier. The slow, steady warmth of belonging. It didn't come from grand gestures or titles. It came from the quiet spaces, the unseen acts. And somewhere in the depth of her bones, a part of her that had gone quiet began to wake up again. Not with a roar, but with a whisper. This is what it feels like to begin again. The Monday after she saved the teenage girl, Hannah arrived at the center earlier than usual. The sky was still gray, dew clinging to the bus stop benches, and the streets smelled faintly of wet pavement and old leaves. She unlocked the side entrance, flipped the lights on one by one, and stood still in the quiet for a moment, just breathing. It had only been a few weeks since she started working here, yet something had already shifted. Her body still ached at the end of the day, her rent was still late, and the world hadn't magically softened. But inside her, something steady had begun to grow. It wasn't hope. It was something deeper. She wheeled out the foldable chairs into the common room, preparing for the women's circle later that morning. Rosa would bring pastries and tea, as she always did. The women would come, some smiling, some guarded. They'd sit in their familiar chairs, worn by habit and history, and talk about their weeks, about bruises that weren't visible, about kids who asked too many questions, about dreams that still lingered like smoke after a fire. And Hannah would listen. Not as a savior, not even as a leader, but as one of them. It surprised her how naturally it came. Not the tasks, they were sometimes hard, exhausting, but the presence, the showing up. It was something she had done her whole life, just in silence. Now, people noticed. When Marcus, the lanky high schooler who helped with supplies, knocked over an entire shelf of canned goods, he called for her instead of Rosa. When Mrs. Tran needed help filling out paperwork for her green card renewal, she asked for Hannah. When a young boy refused to speak for days, it was Hannah who sat on the floor beside him, quietly building a puzzle until he said, barely above a whisper, "My dad left." And when Julian came by that Friday morning, coffee in hand, she didn't flinch anymore. He leaned against the doorframe of her office, if it could be called that. It was a corner space with one window, a desk that leaned slightly to the right, and a tiny corkboard where she pinned drawings from the neighborhood kids. "How's your Friday open hour going?" he asked. "Busy," she said, taking the cup with a grateful nod. "We had a young mom come in this morning. 2 kids, no stroller. Said she walked 30 minutes to get here." "Did we have what she needed?" "We gave her diapers and a bus pass. Rosa helped her with housing leads. She smiled when she left. That felt like a win." Julian smiled too. "You've turned this place into more than I imagined." She raised an eyebrow. "I didn't do it alone." "No, but you gave it a heartbeat." He said it without flourish, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. And maybe, for him, it was. She didn't respond right away. She sipped the coffee. It was better than usual, probably from that small cafe he liked 2 blocks away. She could picture him there now, nodding politely to the barista, giving exact change. "You never told me why you started all this," she said finally, "the foundation." Julian looked out the window. His face softened. "My mother passed 3 years ago," he said. "Cancer came fast, quietly." Hannah lowered his cup. "I'm sorry." She always said she wanted to make things better for people who were forgotten, but she never got the time. After she died, I realized I'd built a life filled with things, properties, acquisitions, growth metrics, but not people. He paused, then turned to her. "So I started with one small project, then another. It kept me from disappearing into grief. And somewhere along the way, it became something real." Hannah nodded, understanding in a way few would. "Do you miss her?" she asked. "Every day," he said. A long silence stretched between them. Then she smiled, small, warm, the kind that doesn't need teeth. "Maybe she'd be proud of this." "I think she'd be proud of you," he replied. Later that afternoon, as the sun pushed through the clouds for the first time in days, a group of children spilled into the common room with sticky hands and wide grins. Hannah crouched beside a girl who had brought her a drawing, 5 stick figures standing under a bright orange sun, one of them wearing a purple dress with a name tag. "That's you," the girl said. Hannah laughed. "How did you know I like purple?" "You just look like someone who does." She pinned the drawing to her corkboard, right next to the others. There were so many now. Crayon hearts, misspelled names, houses with lopsided chimneys. It didn't look like success, but it looked like home. In the following days, new ideas began to take shape. Hannah drafted a weekend reading program, talked to a retired teacher about offering ESL classes, suggested turning the vacant lot beside the center into a small community garden. Julian approved every proposal without question. One evening, they sat in the backyard of the center, watching the street lamps flicker on. The air was crisp, hinting at early winter. The hum of traffic in the distance blended with the occasional shout of kids playing soccer nearby. Julian handed her a warm drink. "You're building something here, you know," he said. "Not just programs, a way forward." Hannah looked around. She saw people lingering by the entrance, not because they had nowhere to go, but because they wanted to stay a little longer. "I'm just making space," she said. "And that's everything," Julian replied. She glanced at him. His posture was relaxed, his gaze soft. "I'm still figuring it out," she admitted. "So am I." They sat in silence after that, the kind that felt easy, like music without words. For the first time in a long time, Hannah didn't feel like she was just surviving. She was planting something. And though she didn't know what it would become, she finally believed it might grow. Hannah wasn't prepared for the email when it came. It arrived early on a Thursday morning, just as she was unlocking the front door of the center. The subject line was short, vague. Media inquiry, urgent response requested. But the name and the signature stopped her cold. A journalist from one of the city's largest online platforms. The kind of outlet that took feel-good stories and spun them into content for clicks. They'd already spoken to someone who had sent in a tip. A photo, too. Attached at the bottom was an image. Hannah, holding the baby in the parking lot, wet hair plastered to her cheeks, apron still on. Her expression caught mid-motion, raw, alarmed, vulnerable. And next to her, in the blurred background, was Julian, half obscured by the car door, looking directly at her. Hannah's stomach dropped. She didn't remember anyone taking that photo, didn't remember looking toward his car. But there it was, as if that moment, so personal, so instinctive, had been captured not for memory, but for manipulation. She closed the laptop. She didn't open it again all morning. The center bustled as usual. Rosa brought in her thermos of tea. Marcus helped set up the reading corner. Kids spilled into the hallways, trailing sticky fingers and endless questions. On the surface, nothing had changed. But inside her, something twisted. By noon, the news had spread. A volunteer mentioned seeing her face online. A parent brought in their child and added, half laughing, "Didn't know we had a local celebrity here." Someone from a city grant board emailed Julian asking if the attention would be used to promote their next campaign. Hannah felt herself shrinking. It wasn't the exposure that cut deep, it was the framing. The way the article, now live, called her a symbol of second chances, implied she'd been plucked from poverty by a benevolent man in a suit. It hinted at charity, at pity, at a narrative she had never agreed to. And worst of all, it named the foundation, Julian's foundation, with quotes she never gave, words she never spoke. That night, long after everyone left, she stood in the supply room, lights off, staring at the shelves of canned beans and baby formula. The hum of the refrigerator buzzed faintly behind her. She held a box of rice too long, her fingers numb against the cardboard. Julian found her there. "I was looking for you," he said softly. She didn't turn around. "I saw it. I didn't know they would publish without talking to you first. Did you talk to them at all?" "I answered a few questions, general ones. I didn't know what angle they were taking." "You let them call me a charity case?" His breath caught, barely audible. "I didn't mean for that to happen, but it did." She turned, finally. Her face wasn't angry. It was worse. It was hurt. "All this time, I thought you saw me," she said, "really saw me. But now I wonder if you just needed someone for your story, too." "No," Julian said, stepping forward. "No, Hannah, that's not what this is." "Then what is it? Because right now, I'm just the girl who got lucky, the girl who got saved." He shook his head. "That's not how I see you. That's not how anyone here sees you." "But that's what they'll think," she whispered. "And I've worked too hard for too long to let one headline rewrite everything." A long silence fell. Then she added, almost to herself, "I can't be a symbol, Julian. I barely learned how to be a person." His voice dropped, low and gentle. "You were never just a symbol. You were the reason I remembered what real looks like." But she didn't answer. She just brushed past him, her steps too quiet to echo. By the next morning, her desk was cleared. No big scene, no farewell email, just a note to Rosa saying thank you. Julian sat alone in the office she used to fill with warmth. The corkboard was bare, Only the holes from the pushpins remained. He tried to call. She didn't answer. He waited outside the grocery store one evening, hoping she'd still be on that rusted bike. She wasn't. She was gone. The center ran, of course. Programs continued. Donations still came in. But it was different. There was no more soft humming in the morning. No more sticky drawings on the windows. No more extra slices of banana bread wrapped in napkins and left quietly on his desk. Julian functioned. But he didn't move forward. He replayed the conversation in his head, wondered if he should have fought harder, if he should have pulled the article, apologized sooner, told her more clearly, more vulnerably, that the foundation had changed because of her, not the other way around. Instead, he waited, and the waiting turned into days, then weeks. One afternoon, while reviewing grant proposals, he found a sheet tucked into the bottom of Hannah's old folder. It was handwritten, a rough outline, titled, "Maybe One Day, a place where people don't have to explain their pain." Below it were ideas. A support network for women who'd left abusive homes. A hotline that didn't just connect people to services, but stayed with them. One call a week, every week, until they got on their feet. A list of names, Rosas, Marcuses, a few clients, a few anonymous. At the bottom was one line. If you want to matter, build a place where people don't have to beg to be seen. Julian folded the page, carefully, held it to his chest. And for the first time in years, he let himself cry, not out of regret, but because he realized something vital. She hadn't left because she didn't belong. She'd left because no one fought for the truth of who she was, and that he could still fix. Julian never liked the sound of his own voice. He was good at speaking, sure, articulate, measured, always saying just enough in just the right tone. But when he listened to recordings of himself on stage or in interviews, he always winced. It wasn't about nerves, it was about distance. His words always sounded like they were dressed in clothes too fine for the truth. But that morning, sitting across from a young podcast host in a sunlit studio filled with mismatched furniture and humming laptops, Julian decided to speak plainly. The host had invited him to talk about the Markham Initiative's recent programs. A casual episode, a plug. Julian had agreed, but with one condition. "I want to tell a story," he'd said. The episode began like any other. A bit of banter, some background, a few questions about funding and long-term goals. But then Julian leaned forward, removed the subtle polish from his tone, and began. "Years ago," he said, "my mother collapsed in a parking lot. I was 18, paralyzed by fear. People passed by. No one stopped." He paused, let the silence settle. But then a girl did. A teenage girl in an old hoodie bent down beside my mother and held her hand. Told me what to do. She stayed. She didn't ask for thanks or recognition. She left before the ambulance arrived. I never got her name." The host nodded slowly, caught off guard by the shift. Julian continued. 15 years later, I saw her again. Same posture, same quiet courage. This time, she was cradling a crying baby left in a car. She didn't know anyone was watching, but I was. He reached into his coat pocket and unfolded a piece of paper. "She's the reason the Markham Initiative looks the way it does. Her name is Hannah Miller." He didn't read her resume. He didn't list her accomplishments. He just spoke about moments, the ones the world usually overlooks. She didn't need saving, he said. She needed space, trust, a platform she could shape, not one shaped for her. And I failed her when I let the narrative become about me. The host leaned in. "Are you saying the story that went viral about the grocery clerk turned program leader wasn't your doing?" "It was my silence that did the damage," Julian said. "I let the world tell a version of her that wasn't true. I stood back when I should have stepped forward." Another pause. "She left," he added quietly, "and if I could go back, I wouldn't try to stop her. I'd try to stand beside her. I'd say, 'You're not a symbol. You're the blueprint.'" When the episode aired, it wasn't the usual traffic spike. It was something different. The inbox of the podcast flooded with messages. From women who had left jobs because they were misrepresented. From social workers who said they finally felt seen. From a girl who wrote, "I don't know this Hannah, but I think she's the person I want to be when I grow up." And then, 3 days later, a quiet knock came at the center side door. Julian was in the main hall, helping set up tables for a weekend workshop. Rosa opened the door and stepped back quickly, surprise flashing across her face. Hannah stood there, wind-blown, hood down, a paper bag of pastries in one hand. Julian came into view, breath catching in his throat. She offered the bag wordlessly. He took it. Then she held up a second cup of coffee. "For you," she said, voice soft but steady. "Don't ask me what's in it. I just picked what you always seem to order." Julian took the cup like it was something fragile. "I heard the podcast," she added. "Didn't expect to, wasn't looking for it, but it found me." He nodded. "I hoped it would." "I was angry," she said, her eyes not accusing, just honest. "Not just at you, at the whole idea of being turned into a message. I spent years trying to prove I had value, that I wasn't just some girl who showed up at the wrong moments. And then I saw myself in headlines I didn't write." "I know," he said quietly. "I'm sorry." "I didn't leave because I didn't care," she said. "I left because I did. Because if I stayed, I'd let them rewrite me again." Julian looked down at the cup in his hands, then back at her. "You're not rewritten," he said. "You never were. You just paused the story until it could be told right." She smiled faintly. "I liked what you said about the blueprint. I meant it." "I brought banana bread too," she said, holding up a small foil-wrapped square, still warm. He let out a quiet laugh. "God, I miss that." "Don't make this bigger than it is," she said. "I'm not promising anything." "I won't ask you to," he replied, "but I'm glad you're here." She stepped inside slowly, looked around. Everything was still the same. The chipped tables, the cluttered corkboard, the way the late afternoon sun filtered through the dusty windows. And yet, it felt different, like it was waiting for her return. Rosa came around the corner and caught Hannah in a hug that startled them both. "I kept your mug," Rosa whispered. "No one else touches it." That night, after the building emptied, Hannah sat again at her old desk. The corkboard remained bare. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a folded drawing, a stick figure version of her, drawn by one of the kids weeks ago. Purple dress, lopsided smile. She pinned it up. Julian stood in the doorway, hands in his pockets, watching her without speaking. "I'm not coming back for good," she said. "I know. I'm coming back for today. That's enough." "It is." The lights flickered as the night took hold. In the quiet, in the soft return of her presence, the center exhaled. And so did he. The truth was no longer hidden in headlines or podcasts. It was here, in the creak of a chair, the rustle of paper, the scent of banana bread in a paper bag, and in the woman who had finally, fully stepped into her own story. It started slowly, not with declarations, not with bouquets or stolen glances. There was no line they crossed, no single moment where friendship blurred into something else. It was quieter than that, truer. It began with the coffee. Hannah kept bringing it, even after that first return. Always the same order. No words exchanged about it. Just a cup on Julian's desk, just after opening, still warm. Some days it came with a note, a dry joke, a quote, a list of names she wanted to prioritize for winter clothing vouchers. Then there were the walks. They never planned them. They just happened. At the end of long days, or between meetings, or while waiting for volunteers to arrive. They'd circle the block, talking about everything except the obvious. She told him about the library she used to hide in as a kid. He told her about the treehouse his father once built and how it collapsed after one season. She laughed harder than she had in years. He liked that sound. Then came the late evenings. After everyone had gone home, the lights off except for one in the back room. Julian would still be typing emails, and Hannah would still be reviewing intake forms. At some point, one of them would speak. "I'm hungry. Let's find something." They never went far. Just greasy diners or food trucks. She liked grilled cheese. He always ordered the same thing: chicken, extra rice. She teased him for his lack of variety. He teased her for her obsession with hot sauce. People began to notice. Not in the way gossip grows, but in the way warmth spreads. Rosa raised an eyebrow one afternoon when she saw them arguing over paint swatches for the new kids' reading room, then watched them settle the debate with a game of rock, paper, scissors. Hannah won. Julian pretended to be outraged for an hour. But underneath all the laughter, there was something gentler forming, something they didn't name. Hannah began to let herself rest. Not all at once, but in moments. She stopped checking her phone every 10 minutes, stopped flinching when someone praised her. She began to take up space, not apologetically, but with quiet certainty. Julian, too, changed. He delegated more, trusted more. He stopped needing every project to be perfect. He focused instead on making sure the people behind them felt whole. She saw the way he sat with clients now, not across from them, but beside. He'd learned from her without saying so. One evening, after a particularly long shift of organizing winter supply kits, they sat on the center's rooftop. The city stretched around them, quiet for once, the buildings almost soft in the haze of dusk. Hannah pulled her knees up to her chest. "Do you ever think about what your life would have been if you hadn't been, rich?" Julian smiled. "Every time I try to cook for myself." She laughed, then quieter. "No, really." He looked out at the lights. "I think I would have been lonely either way, but maybe less busy about it." She tilted her head. "You're not lonely now?" He didn't answer right away. "No," he said finally, "not when you're here." There it was. Unsaid, undeclared, and yet more certain than anything they could have written down. She didn't look away. "I'm not used to being seen this clearly." "I'm not used to seeing anyone past the surface," he replied. "But with you, it's like my eyes forgot how to look away." They didn't kiss. They didn't touch. But in that moment, something held them. A thread, a recognition, not of passion, but of safety. Later that week, Julian brought her a book he thought she'd like. She did. She stayed up reading it until 2 in the morning, underlining passages, scribbling notes. The next day, she handed it back and said, "I underlined what felt like truth." He kept the book, never lending it to anyone else. And so the weeks passed, each one folding gently into the next. Together, they restructured the intake system to be more trauma-informed. They brought in therapists from the university for free sessions. They launched a mentorship program for teenagers, pairing them with former clients who had rebuilt their lives. Every decision was made side by side. Every challenge faced with the same rhythm. She led with instinct. He supported with infrastructure. She pushed for change. He paved the way. It wasn't romantic in the traditional sense. There were no grand gestures, no sweeping confessions. But in the way he looked at her when she laughed, in the way she waited for his opinion before finalizing a flyer, in the small ways they showed up, again and again, something unmistakable had formed. One night, after a fundraiser ended and the last of the guests had gone, Hannah lingered in the hallway, barefoot, heels in hand. Julian approached, tie loosened, sleeves rolled, holding 2 glasses of water. She took one. She said, "Tonight was good." It was. "We raised more than I expected." "Because you spoke," he said, "and they finally heard you." She leaned against the wall. "You're not going to say something poetic, are you?" "No." "Good." A beat of silence. Then she added quietly, "But if you did, I'd probably let you." He smiled. "That's dangerous encouragement." She looked up at him. Not past him, not around him, at him. "I'm not scared anymore," she said. "Of what?" "Of being cared for." He didn't say anything, just stepped closer, slowly, and placed his hand lightly, respectfully over hers. No rush, no pressure, just presence. She let him, not because she needed it, but because, for the first time, she wanted it.
Wanted him. Not as a rescuer, not as a partner in purpose, but as the person who had stayed long enough, gently enough, for her to trust what love looked like when it finally arrived without noise. They stood like that for a while, holding nothing but the silence. But inside, something had finally taken root, and it would not be shaken. The idea came on a Tuesday, in the middle of a conversation about something else entirely. They were sitting in the office with Rosa and Marcus, sorting out the logistics for the winter drive, when a soft-spoken woman named Leah, a mother of 3 who had recently completed the center's financial literacy course, tapped gently on the glass door. She had a notebook in her hands, pages fluttering with sticky notes. "I don't want to interrupt," she said, "but I had a thought." Julian waved her in. Hannah looked up, curious. Leah stepped forward, hesitant but hopeful. "There's this old building on 8th and Maple. It used to be a laundromat. It's been empty for years. I walk by it every day on my way to the clinic." "What about it?" Hannah asked. "Well," Leah said, shifting her weight, "I was thinking, what if we made it into something? A place that belongs to us." "To the community?" Julian asked. She nodded quickly. "Yeah, a shared space, not just another office or shelter, something that feels like ours, where we don't have to sign in at a front desk just to be believed. A place where we grow things, literally and figuratively." No one spoke for a moment. Then Rosa clapped her hands once. "That's the smartest thing I've heard all week." Julian looked at Hannah. She was already reaching for a pen. They called it the corner room. The name came from a comment Marcus had made during brainstorming. It should feel like the corner of your favorite coffee shop or your grandma's kitchen, safe, familiar, soft around the edges. They envisioned a place with books and warm lights, rooms that smelled like baking bread, a courtyard with vegetables growing up wooden trellises, an open kitchen where parents could cook together, a storytelling nook for kids, a long table for teens doing homework, a walk-in closet filled with donated clothes, sorted by dignity, not just size. But more than anything, they wanted it to be a place where no one had to explain their pain before receiving help. Julian made the first phone call that afternoon. The building was still city-owned, but neglected. The paperwork would be a nightmare. He said it would be worth it. Hannah, meanwhile, began collecting stories. She sat with every community member who passed through the center and asked them one question: what would you want to see in a place built for you? Answers filled pages. A piano, even if no one knows how to play it. Blankets that smell like clean laundry. Silence, but not loneliness. Someone who remembers your name when you walk in. Hannah taped the notes to the wall in her office, one by one, until the entire space was wallpapered with dreams. Julian watched her each day, how she listened with her full body, how she didn't rush, how she asked follow-up questions that made people feel known. She wasn't just collecting data, she was gathering longing. In late February, they held a town hall. Word spread fast. Families came in coats and scarves, filling the folding chairs 2 hours before the start time. Julian opened the meeting, but only briefly. He introduced Hannah as the lead of the project. The applause that followed startled her, but not because it was loud, because it felt earned. She stepped up to the mic, holding a folder thick with pages.
"We've been asking what you need," she said, voice strong but calm. "Now we want to build it, with you, not for you." The meeting turned into a planning session. Teams formed on the spot. Volunteers raised hands. A retired architect offered to draw preliminary layouts. A local muralist pledged to paint the exterior. Someone brought tamales. Someone else brought extra chairs. Julian watched from the back of the room, hands folded, heart full. He'd launched dozens of initiatives in his life, but nothing had ever felt like this. This wasn't philanthropy. This was love taking form. Over the next few months, the corner room came alive. The city approved the lease under a long-term community usage clause. Local businesses donated materials. Hannah led the organizing, schedules, permits, volunteer shifts, while Julian handled legal and logistical hurdles, opening doors she didn't even know existed. They worked side by side, most days covered in paint or sawdust, laughing more than they argued. When things went wrong, and they often did, they sat on upturned buckets and figured it out together. Kids came by after school to help. Marcus taught them how to use a drill. Rosa curated a small library in the back, filling it with bilingual books and picture stories that reflected the faces of the people who walked through the door. The walls were painted warm yellows and deep greens. Every room had a window. Every couch a knitted blanket. There was no reception desk, just a round table at the entrance, where someone always sat with tea and conversation. On the first day of spring, they opened the doors. No ribbon cutting, no stage, just music playing from someone's old speaker and the smell of fresh bread wafting from the kitchen. Julian stood in the corner of the room as people flooded in, touching the walls like they needed proof it was real. Then he saw her, Hannah, kneeling to adjust a chair for a little boy. Smiling, eyes lit with the kind of light that doesn't fade when the sun goes down. He walked over slowly. She looked up, sensing him without needing to turn. "You did it," he said. "No," she replied, "we did." He held her gaze. "How does it feel?" She looked around. People laughing, kids curled up on cushions, someone teaching another how to sew. "Like we just built a home without walls," she said. He nodded. Then, without thinking, he reached for her hand. She let him. And in that shared touch, fingers threaded not out of need but choice, there was no need for words. They had already said everything that mattered. Not in speeches, but in bricks and paint and one open door after another. The invitation was simple. A hand-pressed card tucked into paper envelopes delivered one by one to the people who had helped shape it all. No big announcements, no grand titles, just a single sentence, printed in soft gray ink. "Join us to celebrate the first year of something we built together." It was signed with no names, only the logo of the corner room sketched like a child's drawing. Uneven roof, wide door, a sun above the chimney. They chose to hold it where everything began. Not in the new building, not at a rented hall, but in the old grocery store parking lot where Hannah had once run through the rain to save a crying child. The lot had changed since then. Lines newly painted, a small flower bed near the entrance, fresh gravel where the potholes used to be. But the air still held something of that day, something unshakable. The morning of the celebration arrived with perfect spring light.
Warm but not yet heavy. The sky a pale, endless blue. Tables lined the perimeter of the lot, wooden ones borrowed from churches and schools, each decorated with hand-drawn signs and fresh-cut wildflowers. Streamers hung between light poles, fluttering like soft music in the breeze. Children arrived first, tugging parents by the hand, faces already sticky from anticipation. Then came the elders, Mrs. Tran with her cane wrapped in ribbon, Rosa pushing a cart of tamales, the retired bus driver who now ran a Saturday poetry club in the center's back room. By noon, the lot pulsed with life. There was no stage, no seating chart, just a circle. Everyone stood inside it, shoulder to shoulder. Julian stepped forward first, not as host, not as benefactor, but as one of many. "Thank you," he said, micless, voice open. "This isn't a speech. This is a memory." He turned to Hannah. She stepped forward, wearing a navy cotton dress, hair pulled up simply, a small pin on her collar. "You are seen." "I used to think you had to suffer alone to earn peace," she said, words quiet but carrying. "That your past had to be hidden to be respected. But this last year taught me something different." She looked around a circle, faces smiling, tearful, expectant. "You don't heal alone. You heal with others, and sometimes you even get to grow together." Applause didn't erupt, it swelled, like a wave, slow, grounded, real. After that, everything unfolded like a mosaic. People came up, one by one, to share something, a song, a short story, a blessing in another language. The teenage girl Hannah had once walked in off the street stood with a handmade card and whispered, "Thank you for giving me a place to remember I mattered." Marcus read a list of names, the volunteers who had made the center breathe. Each name was met with cheers. Then came the plaque. Someone had hung a cloth over the old lamppost at the far corner of the lot. At just the right moment, Rosa pulled it back. A small metal plate glinted in the light. "In honor of Hannah Miller, who reminds us that some people carry quiet rain and still choose to be shelter for others." Hannah froze. She hadn't known. Julian stepped beside her, eyes glistening but not pushing, just being there. She walked up to the plaque slowly, fingers brushing the inscription. Then she turned. "I didn't build this alone," she said. "You didn't. But I believed in it, and you believed in me. I still do." She looked at him, really looked. This man who had once been a stranger in a black car, and who now stood like a lighthouse in her life. Not shining for attention, just steady, constant. The music began, nothing formal, just a playlist through a borrowed speaker. People danced, not choreographed, not performative, just bodies moving in joy. Grandmothers with toddlers, teenagers with elders, Rosa spinning Julian in a messy circle. Laughter rippled like sunlight through trees. Hannah stood at the edge of it all, watching, absorbing. Then a small hand reached for hers. The same child from the car that day, now walking, smiling, wearing a yellow dress. Her mother stood nearby, waving shyly. Hannah knelt. "Hello, sweet one." The girl didn't speak, just touched Hannah's cheek and grinned. Hannah felt her chest bloom. Later that evening, as the sun dipped low and lanterns began to flicker on, Julian found her sitting on the hood of an old car, arms wrapped loosely around her knees. He joined her wordlessly. They sat like that for a while, watching as people began to clean up, stacking chairs, hugging goodbye. "I kept thinking about what I'd say today," he finally murmured, "but the truth is, I didn't need to say anything. You've said it all with the way you live." She turned to him. "I never thought I'd get here." "You didn't arrive," he said gently. "You grew."
She smiled. Then, almost shyly, "Can I tell you something?" "Always." "I think I'm ready." "For what?" "For the next chapter. With you." He didn't reach for her hand. She reached for his. And that was enough. No kiss, no music swelling in the background, just a quiet agreement between two people who had learned how to be whole, and were now ready to be whole together. Below them, the last of the lanterns swayed in the breeze. A child laughed. Someone played a wrong note on a ukulele, and everyone clapped anyway. The world didn't stop spinning, but for Hannah and Julian, something settled. A life, a love, not built on grand beginnings, but grown from ordinary rain, everyday hands, and the choice to stay. Again, and again, and again.